Hello. I was happy to find that the Karma series has a new part. How delightful, ain't it? So I hope you really will enjoy this new part of the Adventures of Karma by Leahistyping. This one will be called Izuku Midoriya's Disastrous Guide to Living a Double Life. Chapter 1, A New Perspective. By the time Izuku made it home, it was late in the evening. The first day of the sports festival was complete. Similar to the Olympics, the sports festival ran for multiple days. Well, 3 to be exact. Some of the grades took longer to finish than the others, so the school thought it would be best if they held the festival over the span of 3 days. UA students got free access for every day of the event, though Izuku wasn't sure if he was going to attend the second year's tomorrow. He was exhausted, courtesy of Recovery Girl's work, and wanted to sleep until the next century. Alas, he was still a vigilante, so he'd have to wake up in a few hours to go out on his patrol. He wasn't upset about it, though. He could really use something to clear his mind, and maybe Eraser would have some advice on how to get stronger. If he really was going to compete with the hero course in the future, he needed to be better than he currently was. After his much-needed nap, Izuku awoke to a navy blue sky with stars littering it like raindrops on a sidewalk. He turned to his left to check the time on his alarm clock. His blurry, sleep-filled eyes squinted to make out the time in front of him. 9:37 p.m., it read. After his vision finally focused, his patrol typically started at 10, so he still had some time to get ready before he left for the night. Izuku yawned loudly as he rolled out of bed, his bare feet meeting the cold hardwood floor beneath him. A carpet would be nice. Izuku thought briefly, though it passed through his mind not even a second later. It was a nice thought to have, but it was currently unavailable, considering that he barely has money to scrape together for dinner. His dad's money was enough to cover for food and rent, but considering UA's enrollment cost, he had to sacrifice a few things to afford it. Now he relies on side jobs he picks up around town to pay for meals, which isn't the most reliable source of income. But hey, what works, right? He strolled into the kitchen tiredly, scratching his head as he did. As he proceeded towards his fridge, his mind started to create a mental plan for his patrol that night. He should do patrol route 8. He hadn't done that in a while, so it'd be a nice change of scenery. He'd probably run into Eraser 20 minutes after he set out, which would give him plenty of time to think about what he wanted to ask him. Opening the fridge, Izuku sighed as he reviewed his stock. Milk, eggs, old condiments, a few different fruits and vegetables, and some leftovers from a restaurant that offered him extra food. Considering his options, Izuku grabbed the milk and placed it on the counter. He needed something quick and simple, and he still had some cereal in one of the neighboring cupboards. As he fixed his meal for the night, he made a mental note to stop by the store to grab a few things, since he doubted that having lunch as his primary meal wasn't going to get him very far long term. Izuku hummed contentedly as he swallowed the chocolate-flavored circles. Once he finished eating, his night was really going to begin. Spring had appeared in full force. Karma noticed as he felt the wind blow against his hood and mask. Although the night air was still a bit chilly, it was gradually warming, and he knew that in no time he'd be sweating buckets when fighting the latest crookie he came across. As he casually hopped from rooftop to rooftop, eyes focused on finding anyone who may be in need of help, he sensed a familiar set of eyes landing on him. He stopped on the current rooftop he was on and waited for the spectator to make his arrival. Just to tease him, Eraser would sometimes take his sweet time revealing himself, wanting to see how long Karma's patience would last. However, Eraser didn't do that tonight and instead made his appearance right after his presence was sensed.
"How are you feeling, kid?"
he asked casually as he approached the vigilante.
"That bruise not giving you too much trouble?"
he added soon after they were face to face. Although his expression was nonchalant, Karma couldn't help but notice the worry in his hardened gaze.
"Yeah, I'm feeling all right,"
Karma replied, taking a seat on the ledge of the roof. Sometimes before they patrolled, they would just talk about whatever was on their minds, whether it was about Eraserhead's Hell class or Karma's upcoming tests or plans. It didn't matter. Karma liked those kinds of nights. It gave him someone to talk to, someone to trust. Inmates have definitely been helpful, though. I wouldn't be anywhere without them. He joked lightly. He didn't like lying to the pro, but it would be difficult to explain that his wounds magically healed overnight. Plus, he did use them this morning, so it wasn't a complete lie. Eraser huffed in response, nodding slightly as he sat down next to the vigilante. "What about you?" Karma asked, his tone obviously teasing. "You must be exhausted from all the commentary you gave today."
You saw that, huh?"
Eraser asked as he sighed defeatedly, almost as if he were embarrassed by the prospect of him being on TV. Karma thought he probably was.
"It's hard to miss your bright personality next to Present Mike."
Karma choked, sarcasm leaking through his voice like overflowing water. He'd never get tired of annoying Eraserhead.
"What do you think of the festival?"
Eraser asked, choosing to ignore Karma's previous jab. He shifted slightly, letting the pressure of his body fall from one arm to another as they rested on the roof.
"It was really cool,"
Karma exclaimed excitedly.
"There were so many amazing quirks and fights. I'm impressed by the amount of talent one school can have."
He was even more impressed that he was able to hold his ground against them, though he didn't admit that part out loud.
"I'm not surprised about Bakugo winning,"
Karma added, cursing silently at his almost slip-up.
"He had incredible skills. Same with Todoroki."
"Indeed," Eraser agreed, not commenting on Karma's stutter. Whether he didn't notice or didn't care, Karma wasn't sure.
"They are my top students, so I expected as much from them." What did you think of the other contestants?"
Karma asked curiously. He was interested in what Eraser took a liking to, without the whole "I like all my students equally" facade. Eraser had to have favorites, and Karma refused to believe otherwise.
"Well, I'm equally interested in all of my students' progress. It's my job to make them succeed in the field,"
Eraser said, and it looks like he spoke too soon.
Damn! "However, there are a few I've gained interest in since the festival."
he added right after, making Karma's interest peak.
Which students?
Karma asked, excitedly, desperately wanting to know which of Eraser's students caught his attention. What he looked for in the future heroes and in students. Karma thought that those interests said a lot about a person.
Eager there, kid.
Eraser smiled, teasing the vigilante for his undeniable curiosity. Karma only scoffed in return before the hero continued on.
I'm undoubtedly intrigued about Todoroki and Bakugo, but more so about their past and drives. There's something about them that I cannot place my finger on. I also believe on keeping an eye on Yaoyorozu, since I believe her confidence may be in jeopardy with her loss in the tournament.
Eraser explained slowly, looking up at the sky as he said what was on his mind. Karma listened intently as he absorbed everything the hero was saying. He said what was on his mind. Karma listened intently as he absorbed everything the hero was saying, while also secretly agreeing with everything he listed.
There's also Ida that I'm worried about. I fear that he may be emotionally unstable.
Eraser nearly whispered, almost as if he were hesitant to share such information, which made sense to an extent, considering these were his students and all. Cause of the sports festival? Karma asked, his finger tapping idly on the roof beside him. He didn't see much of Ida after his match with Todoroki. He wasn't able to get a good read on him.
Not exactly.
Eraserhead, his voice hardening at the change of discussion.
His brother was hospitalized during the festival, so I imagine that he is quite distraught about it.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Karma replied sadly, his hands scrunching together to form a fist. He hoped that Ida would be okay. It was a difficult thing to go through. He knew from experience, after all.
He'll be all right with time,
the hero said aloud, though it felt like he was doing it out of comfort for himself and his student rather than saying it to Karma.
But other than them, there are two more who got my attention, and Mike's for that matter,
he added, changing the topic to something more light-hearted.
Really? Who else?
Karma asked, his interest growing with the mention of his homeroom teacher.
They are my students, but Mike's actually. Midoriya and Shinso. For not being in the hero course, third place is pretty damn good.
Eraser replied indifferently, not realizing that his comment completely flipped Karma's life on his axis. He knew Present Mike was proud of him, but Eraser was too. Obviously, the festivals was going to give him some coverage, and he knew Eraser would be watching him. That's why he had to hold back at some points. But he didn't consider that Eraser would take an interest in him.
What did you find interesting about them?
Karma asked, trying his best to seem casual about the pro's interest in his school persona. Something that he never thought would happen.
It's not like their matches.
It's not like their matches had the same intensity as everyone else, he added, silently apologizing to Shinso for the insult about his fights. If he was being honest, however, he was more talking about his own matches.
That is correct,
Eraser agreed as he nodded his head. Karma held back a sigh at the hero's words. He knew he was right about his fights, but deep down there was some subconscious hope that maybe he'd hear something different from his mentor.
However, they showed incredible strength and strategic planning. I'm fairly certain they were the first team in UA history to bungee jump during the cavalry battle,
Eraser said, his gaze scanning the city horizon. The sun had long since set, and the indigo sky continued to shine with stars through, though they were blurred due to the city pollution.
You think so?
Karma asked, sounding more hopeful than he meant to.
Definitely,
Eraser replied.
Also, I must hand it to them. They know how to fight. They had solid forms, though Shinzo could use a bit more practice.
He added. Karma held back a snort at Eraser's critique, silently wondering what his friend would do if he were here. A gentle stillness formed around them, and Karma took a deep breath as he looked down at the street below him. The city was silent, with distant sirens being the only noise in its near vicinity. The wind blew gently against Karma's mask, causing his hood to move slightly. He was grateful that tonight was a slow night. It meant people were safe, and it also meant he got to rest for once in his life. A few minutes later, Eraser cleared his throat, as if he were about to say something that was on his mind. Karma directed his gaze towards the hero and noticed that he was still looking away.
You know,
Eraser said hesitantly.
Midoriya actually reminds me of someone. I've been trying to put my finger on it all day, but I couldn't pinpoint it, what it was that I was missing,
he said, and Karma felt his heart drop to the bottom of his stomach. Who could he possibly remind Eraserhead of?
Did you figure it out?
Karma asked, resisting the urge to gulp or show any signs of nervousness.
I did,
Eraser confirmed.
It was right after his performance in Todoroki's match. I've only seen recklessness like that in 2 other people.
You gonna leave me hanging, old man? Karma teased, gaining an annoyed scoff from the pro.
Don't make me tie you up,
he replied back, seemingly unamused.
But one was my old friend, Oboro, and the other was you.
Karma's heart had once again dropped to the bottom of his stomach, the air flying out of his lungs involuntarily. He wasn't careful enough, was he? He should have just given up right away, but damn, Todoroki got in his head. What was the right way to go about this? He was treading in dangerous territory. One change in his tone and the game would be up. He'd have to be extra careful moving forward, just until he was off Eraser's radar. Knowing that silence would give Eraser the answer he was looking for, Karma laughed freely, his head lifting to face the night sky. Eraser looked at him curiously, wondering what the vigilante found so funny about his observation.
Me, huh?
Karma snorted, his nonchalant facade rising at full force. If he could just shrug this off, there was a chance he'd be in the clear.
What's so funny, kid?
Eraser asked, more curious than confused. He tapped his fingers against the solid concrete as he waited for an explanation.
I just don't see it,
Karma replied, his gaze falling back down to meet the hero's.
He goes to the top hero school in the world. He's more heroic than I'll ever be. Plus, I'm not that reckless,
he argued.
That stabbing from a few weeks ago tells me otherwise,
Eraser countered, making Karma roll his eyes.
It was a mild graze,
Karma exclaimed defensively,
and it's not my fault I panicked after seeing the hostage,
he added as he crossed his arms and pouted dramatically.
You're unbelievable,
Eraser sighed, making Karma laugh at his resignation. It was silent again, neither of them knowing what to say after Eraserhead's comparison. Not wanting to let the silence continue, Karma said, "In another universe, maybe I could be him." Eraser looked surprised, likely not expecting him to add on his comment. Karma wasn't expecting it either. "But I'm not hero material. I'm too weak compared to them. I know how I act confident all the time, but the truth is that if you put me up against someone like Bakugo or Todoroki, I'd be done for. All I'll ever be good at is catching crooks and helping people get home." The sudden outburst made both of them still. Karma wasn't sure why his emotions had jumped out of him, and he was certain that Eraser was questioning his random moments of vulnerability. Karma couldn't hold back the gulp this time as he waited for Eraserhead's response.
"Kid, you know that's not true,"
Eraser said softly yet firmly. He was trying to state his point without further upsetting Karma, and the latter appreciated it immensely.
"How can I get stronger?"
Karma asked abruptly, ignoring the hero's protest. Maybe it was because he was exhausted from the events of the day, or maybe the question that had been gnawing at him all day finally broke through the surface. Karma didn't care enough to think about it. Eraser paused for a moment, noticing the urgency that laced the vigilante's tone. Karma stared at him blankly as he waited for an answer. He'd take anything. It'd be better than silently suffering and waiting to find the answer himself.
"First, I need to understand why you want to get stronger. Only then will you know the necessary steps to get there."
Eraser replied, his gaze soft and steady on the vigilante. Karma pauses, momentarily absorbing the hero's advice. Why did he want to be stronger?
I need to be stronger because I hate feeling powerless,"
Karma admitted.
"If I was better, I would have been able to stop people faster and protect others better. Watching the sports festival made me realize that I'll never be that level at my current ability, and if I want to save half as many people as the hero course will, I need to improve."
His thumbs rubbed together as he put his thoughts into words, and his eyes drifted to the ground in an attempt to avoid the hero's curious gaze.
"That's an unhealthy mindset to have, kid,"
Eraser states objectively, though empathetically nonetheless. His tone suggests that this isn't the first time he's had this conversation, Karma noted.
"What? How is it unhealthy if I want to save people?"
Karma stammered. Eraser shrugged casually before saying,
"Because there will be times where you can't save everyone. People slip through your fingers. That's what happens in this line of work. All you can do is work harder to not repeat mistakes again."
Karma hummed, acknowledging the pro's advice, likely some he gained from his own experience. Karma wouldn't ask just yet.
"What I think you need, though," Eraser added, "is perspective. Try to see things differently and expand on your skills. You'll better understand your strengths and weaknesses that way."
Perspective, huh? Karma repeated, his legs swinging idly over the edge of the roof. He never thought about it that way. Maybe what he needed was a change of scenery. Yeah, that'd be good. He didn't have school or any jobs tomorrow, so he could stay out later than he typically did. Finalizing his decision, he stood up and brushed the dirt off his legs, watching as Eraser once again looked at him, eyes filled with curiosity.
"Where are you going?"
the hero asked. Getting a new perspective. Karma smiled, almost laughing as Eraser's gaze shifted from curious to confused. I'm going to another city. Wanna see if a change of scenery will help.
Kid, that's not really what...
Eraser started but was cut off before he could finish his sentence. I'll be fine. Stay here and do your patrol. I'll see you tomorrow. Karma called as he jumped off the roof and landed on the neighboring one. Hosu City! Here I come! Hosu City was an hour or two away from Musutafu, so Izuku opted to use the train for quick travel. Hiding in some back alley, he stripped off his suit, grateful that he kept thin clothing underneath. He grabbed an abandoned paper bag from the trash, wincing as he smelled the foul odor coming from the bin. He quickly threw his equipment into said bag, hoping that he wouldn't have to wash his stuff later. Once his outfit was secure, Izuku made his way to the station, which was thankfully running, and boarded the first train he could. He wasn't really sure what his plan was, truth be told, but Eraser's advice sparked the idea, and he was curious where it was going to take him. As he sat by the window, his eyes watching the city lights zoom by, Izuku's mind began to wander. He was at a crossroad of sorts. He wanted to get stronger by himself, but he knew he could only get so far with his current quirk situation. And now with All Might's offer, he could achieve heights far greater than he could ever imagine. So why was he hesitating? There were factors to consider, obviously. He had his nightly patrols that he didn't really want to give up. He'd shift from a nighttime hero to a spotlight one, and he doubted that he'd continue to see Eraserhead for their patrols. Getting taught by All Might was something he never thought would be an option for him, and he could cry just thinking about it. But there was something familiar, almost consistent about training with the underground hero. Izuku was snapped out of his train of thoughts by the voice of a young child. She and her mom were a few seats down from his spot. Mom looked tired, though not unhappy, and her daughter was brimming with energy. Izuku was a little concerned about them being out this late, but he shook off the thought before it rooted too deeply. They'd be all right. They're in a relatively safe area. The girl was bouncing in her seat excitedly as the mom dug through the bag in an attempt to find something. Finally, the mom pulled out 2 cookies, each of different flavors, and the girl cheered and clapped her hands as her mom displayed her find. All right, Reina, the mother said, a small smile growing on her face. Her eyes shined as she watched her daughter's large grin exceeded hers. Which cookie do you want? This is your last snack, okay? I want both! The girl, Reina, cheered, her hands thrown into the air. No, you can't have both. The mom laughed as she watched her daughter pout in disappointment. That's too much sugar before bed. You'll be up all night. She added, trying to reason with her daughter before she caused a potential scene. Fine, Reina replied, crossing her arms. Can I have some of both? Like half? She asked, a hopeful look spreading across her face. The mom hummed, amused. I don't see why not. Reina cheered again, and she wrapped her arms around her mom's neck to bring her into a hug. Thank you, Mama. Izuku turned his head back towards the window, rubbing his face lightly to remove the tears hiding in his eyes. He tried not to think of his mom too often, but he couldn't avoid moments like that. Sometimes he wondered if he was leading a life his mom would be proud of. if this road he was heading towards would be what she wanted. It wasn't fair that she couldn't see it for herself. Trying to push those emotions down, he replayed the conversation in his head. Reina, the child she was, wanted both of the cookies, and to do so she had some of both. Some of both. Some of both! That was it! Izuku thought, his body straightening at the realization. What if he did both simultaneously? He could train to be a hero by day, with the help of All Might, while still doing his nightly patrols with a razor. He'd get double the experience, making him improve faster, and he could keep both parts of his life. This was it! This was his solution! How hard could it be? Oh, if you knew. Once the train made it to Hosu, Izuku made his way off and found the closest ally to change back into his costume. Although it was small and honestly quite silly, there was something thrilling about changing from Izuku to Karma. The way his confidence seemed to spike when he was reduced to anonymity. Dumping the paper bag in the nearest waste bin, Karma used the fire escape on the neighboring building to get to the roof. His movements were quick and agile, and he made it to the top with ease, inhaling deeply as he let the city air fill his lungs. Karma wasn't exactly sure what he was looking for, truth be told. It was kind of an impulsive decision to patrol in Hosu. His hope to find a new perspective through the new scenery overrode the logistics of the situation. But, alas, he was already this far, and he'd be damned if he didn't find what he was looking for. The patrol went rather smoothly for the most part. He broke up a few scuffles, whether by mediating or simply knocking them out and splitting them up. That wasn't important. After separating his latest dispute, he carried along the rooftops, his hope about finding a new perspective fading by the second. He should probably go about it differently. He shouldn't just wait for it to come to him. He needed to work for it, at least to some extent. As Karma scanned the area, he noticed an old woman walking down the streets, her cane hitting gently against the sidewalk. He stopped abruptly and made his way towards the woman, not even taking a moment to think about it. Landing quietly beside her, he asked, "Hello, ma'am. Do you need any help getting home?" The woman jumped slightly, likely scared by the random person appearing out of nowhere. Karma grimaced, remembering that people couldn't typically sense him approaching. "I need to work on that," he thought. "Who are you, young man?" The old woman replied, surprisingly calm after being scared, and looked to the vigilante up and down as if that would answer her question. "My name is Karma," he said politely. "I go around helping people who may need it. Not that I'm saying you need it, but I just figured, it's all right, dear." The old woman laughed, amused. "Not as sharp as I used to be, so I wouldn't mind company on the way home." "It's settled then. Lead the way." The old woman, Koharu, she said her name was incredibly talkative. Not that Karma minded. She rambled on about her adventures during her youth and how much society had changed since she was a teenager. Karma listened intently, nodding and agreeing as he walked beside her. He still had the brain to keep his guard up. However, the last thing he wanted was for some criminal to take him by surprise while he was with an innocent civilian. Thankfully, they made it to the woman's apartment safely, and the minute Koharu closed her door, Karma was heading down the nearest alleyway. It was the best to stay in the dark as it lowered the chances of someone seeing him and trying to follow. As he made his way down the dark alley, he looked around to study his surroundings. A few dumpsters, fire escapes, and parked cars littered the area, and Karma kept his guard up as he maneuvered his way around them. Who knows what could lurk behind at this time of night? When he reached the end, he jumped on the nearest fire escape to aid his ascent to the roof. The moon was full tonight, and Karma stared at it briefly before continuing his walk across the rooftops. Maybe it was time to call it for the night. He still hadn't found what he was seemingly searching for, and he only had an hour or two left before the train stopped for the night. Right as Karma was about to jump to the next rooftop, he heard rustling in the alley right below him. He ducked quickly and only allowed his head to peek over the edge in an attempt to see who or what it could be. A large dark figure made its way into his line of sight, and it seemed to be rummaging through the trash bin, looking for something. Unsure how to proceed, Karma silently jumped off the building, using the fire escapes and other random objects to make his descent smooth. He landed quietly and summoned the courage he needed before clearing his throat and saying, Are you all right there? The figure stilled momentarily before turning around quickly, a long, sharp knife following. The knife settled between Karma's eyes, and he'd have to look cross-eyed if he wanted to see it properly. However, this wasn't looking for a fight, or else they would have already stabbed him. Trust him, he had experience. The Shadow's voice was deep and a little raspy as they said,
Who are you? What do you want?
Karma raised his arms in the air as a sign of surrender, but not completely letting his guard down. He could jump back, or, if worst comes to worst, pull out his own knife. The name's Karma. I'm just someone who helps people out when they need it, he explained, trying his best to avoid the term vigilante. He didn't particularly like to use it around citizens since there was typically a bad stigma about it.
Oh, so you're a wannabe hero then?
The figure asked, licking the side of their mouth, curious yet amused. Not exactly, Karma replied hesitantly. Obviously, I'd love to help people officially, but considering that I can't really do that, this is all I can do. The person still held the knife to the front of his head, though Karma slightly relaxed his posture when the shadow didn't show any signs of attacking. Whoever it was seemed more on edge about his intentions than trying to get out of any crimes.
Oh, so you're a vigilante,
they corrected, taking Karma by surprise. He doesn't meet people who are typically this blunt.
Yeah, I guess so,
Karma replied, using one of his raised hands to rub the back of his neck. Now, if you don't mind, can you lower your knife? I don't plan on fighting you, not unless I have to. The figure said, barking out a laugh.
You think you could beat me? Your confidence is admirable, but you're out of my league.
The shadows said, though lowered their weapon nonetheless, and Karma watched as it slid effortlessly back into the scabbard on their belt. He lowered his arms slowly while rolling his eyes at the person's insult. Who the hell are you to assume that? He asked, slightly annoyed by the stranger underestimating his ability. The figure slowly stepped into the light, revealing his long, dark hair and pointed chin. He wore an eye mask that was pure white, although covered in dirt. His headband and scarf were red, the color of blood. The bandages and knives littered his body like it was second skin.
I'm Stain, the hero killer kid.
was awesome.
I really, really like it so far.
I need to continue recording. I'll be right back. Well, next week, possibly. For you, at least. For me, it will be a couple minutes. Stay tuned for the next part then. I hope you had fun listening to it. Bye-bye.